let's talk about the new ban list. This ban list is an interesting one, and we'll see why in a second. I thought it'd be easier just to record my screen like everyone else does, because otherwise I don't have to go and look for all the card pictures and then edit them together. This way's a lot easier, a lot lazier. This is the reason why all the other YouTubers do it like this, because it's easy and requires little editing. So first off, we have the limited list, all the D rulers, and Snatch Steal. Snatch Steal wasn't really a big surprise because Snatch Steal is ridiculously good. The Dragon rulers, though, wasn't really expecting that, but I guess Dark Matter Dragon was just too good for them not to limit them, which is kind of sad, because even at 1, they all were really big helps to their attributes. Like, Redox was really good in Earth-type decks, and Blaster was really good in decks that ran a lot of Fire types, and Tidal was really good in Water decks, because all of them have really good effects that really mesh well with their respective attributes. But whatever. And then we got the new limited lists. See, what they did was they went back and like retconned or redded a lot of their banned cards to make them not broken. So it's only natural that they would, come back on the limited list, because some of them would be perfectly fine going back to 3, but I guess they can't really put a card that's been limited for so many years back to 3 just right away, even though it's not really a big threat anymore. Prime example, Sinister Serpent. I have it opened up right here. Its new redded is during your standby phase, if this card is in your graveyard, you can add it to your hand. Also, banish one Sinister Serpent from your graveyard during your opponent's next end phase. You can only use this effect as Sinister Serpent once per turn. So basically, the whole reason Sinister Serpent was banned in the first place was because his effect wasn't this. His effect was if it existed in your graveyard during your standby phase, you could just add it back to your hand. And so if you jumped 3 Sinister Serpents to the graveyard, you could just add all 3 back to your hand during the standby phase, and then use a whole bunch of cards that let you discard, like Lightning Vortex or Dark World crap, basically. Or, no, what's it called? Snipe Hunter. Yeah, that guy, where you just discard cards like crazy to destroy cards in the field. Sinister Serpent would be great with Snipe Hunter, because you could just get them back during your next turn. So discarding wasn't really a big deal with Sinister Serpent. With this new errata, though, he gets banished during your opponent's end phase. So you still get him back during the standby phase, but if you get him back, he'll be banished during your opponent's turn, before you can get him back again. So if he's banished, he doesn't exist in your graveyard. So if you wait to put him back in your graveyard from the banish zone reliably, which there aren't too many cards that do that reliably, I have to add that part there. Because there are a lot of cards that do return cards from the banished zone back to the graveyard, but not very reliably. So he's not really all that great anymore, because you don't have unlimited discards. Still not half bad, but you won't be seeing him. Maybe, I don't know. If there is some kind of way to reliably put him back in the graveyard from the banished zone, then he still might be pretty good, but I can't think of any off the top of my head. Okay, next one. Tour Guide of the Underworld, limited. That's their way of hitting Burning Abyss without actually limiting any of the Burning Abyss monsters, which kind of sucks, because I kind of like Tour Guide, but she was really strong at 3. So at 1, you could still play it, but that kind of sucks. I wish they would just limit some of the Burning Abyss monsters instead, but I guess they do. It is a new archetype, and they are trying to sell them, so that would be stupid on their part to limit them too heavily. Next up, Dragon Ravine is limited again, because with the Dragon Rulers ban, there's no reason for it to be really limited anymore, besides some kind of janky loops. I don't know, it's still a pretty good card, but it's not as broken anymore with the Dragon Rulers gone. Preparation of Rites, that's 100% because of Necros. Sacrifice, I love that name. Sacrifice are finally hitting the Quill-Offs. This card was pretty good. Basically, if you got sent to the graveyard, you got to add a card to your hand. So replace itself, plus gave one of your Quill-Offs the ability to not be destroyed by battle, and be counted as 2 tributes. It did a lot, while also replacing itself. So it was like a hand neutral card. So there was no reason not to run 3 of them, because it was just too good. Also, the card they really should have limited was the one that they semi-limited in Quillfort Scout. He is kind of ridiculous. A +1 every turn by just paying 800 life points. but whatever. At least they're making some stride by putting him in the semi-limited list. Okay, let's see what's up next. Preparation of Rite School, Sacrifice. Symbols of Heritage. This was a weird one. Symbols of Heritage is this card right here, where if you have 3 monsters of the same name in the graveyard, you can select one of them and special summon it. It's kind of like a Monster Reborn, but only if you have 3 monsters of the same name in your graveyard. Putting it at 1, I think there's like some kind of loop you could do with it, which was like a janky OTK or FTK. I don't know what it is, but that's what I was reading, because I was like, why is that card? Because I mean, I've used it a couple times in some decks that put a whole bunch of cards with the same name in the graveyard pretty easily, and even in those decks it wasn't that great, so I would guess it has to be because of some kind of OTK that I don't know about. Temple of the Kings. Okay, this one was another one that was ridiculously OP, but then they nerfed it with a Areta, just like Sinister Serpent. This one, the new card, it says you can activate 1 trap card to turn it with set. You can send 1 mythical beast of Serket in your monster zone, and this card you control to the graveyard. Special summon 1 monster from your hand or deck, or 1 fusion monster from your extra deck. You can only use each effect of Temple of the Kings once per turn. Okay, so this card right here, its old effect was just a baseline. You can activate trap cards the turn they are set. This one, you can only activate 1 trap card the turn it is set, and you can only use either of its effects once per turn. So you can either like activate a trap card the turn it's set, or you can send Mystical Beast, which isn't really that hard to bring out, but he automatically destroys himself unless this card is face up on the field, so you won't see him very often unless this card's out, in which case you can just MST it. If you're running MST, that is, which you might not have to anymore because of something else on the list. Or, no, you still will. Anyways, with its old effect where you can activate trap cards to turn their set, the reason that's bad is because there are so many trap cards that allow you to just straight up draw cards that people don't take because they're trap cards and you have to wait a turn. So the reason Upstart's so good, even though you only draw 1 card and your opponent gains 1,000 life points, is because you can activate it as soon as you draw it. And the reason no one uses Jar of Greed, which is basically the same effect, except your opponent doesn't gain any life points, is because you have to set it. But with this card, in its old form, where you can activate them all the turn it's set, you can basically just draw through your entire deck in 1 turn. It's kind of ridiculous being able to use your trap cards to turn their set, because they're balanced around the way that you can only use them, after they've been set for like a turn. So yeah, you could FTK your opponent with this card in the olden days. Now, not possible. And it's still a neat little effect where you can special summon like a Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon from your deck if you use its other effect. Okay, let's see, Temple of the Kings, Crush Card Virus. Oh yeah, this one was changed as well. It's still kind of ridiculous, but not crazy ridiculous like it was back in the days of Teledad. Its new effect is tribute 1 dark monster with 1,000 or less attack. Your opponent takes no damage until the end of the next turn. Also, look at your opponent's hand and all monsters they control, and if you do, destroy the monsters among them with 1,500 or more attack. Then your opponent can destroy up to 3 monsters of 1,500 or more attack in their deck. Its old effect was, it works basically like the deck Extermination Virus or the other virus card where you have to tribute monsters with a whole bunch more attack. And it would destroy all monsters with 1,500 or more attack, including all ones that they drew for the next 3 turns. Just like the other virus cards. Now it only destroys them all during this turn, plus your opponent doesn't take any damage for like 2 turns, or 1 turn if you activate this card at the end of your turn. And you get to selectively mill 3 cards from your deck. Your opponent can destroy up to 3 monsters with 1,500 or more attack in their deck, so they don't even have to activate this. So now you destroy your opponent's monsters in their hand and on their side of the field with 1,500 or less attack, and they get to mill 3 cards if they want, or not. So it's still a really good card. It's going to probably stay at 1, or it might get, I don't know, I can't see it going past 1, because the first part of this, even though you can't really do any damage to your opponent for like 2 turns, destroying all monsters with more than 1,500 attack is still really good in their hand and on the field. But it's not as ridiculous as it was before, where it kept the effect going for 3 turns. Now it just allows you to mill 3 cards. Okay, so Crush Card Virus, that's going to be pretty cool. Oh, Exchange of Spirit. This is a favorite of mine. Its old effect basically allowed you to FTK your opponent. Like if you're playing a deck where You're allowed to use any of the banned cards you want. You want to play an Exchange of Spirit deck because you can win every turn on your first turn because of its old effect. Now it's not as good as it was to be. Basically, let me just read its new effect. If both players have 15 or more cards in their graveyards, pay 1,000 life points. Each player swaps the cards in their graveyard with the cards in their deck, then shuffles their deck. You can only activate one Exchange of Spirits per duel. Its old effect, only you had to have 15 cards in your graveyard. Basically, what you would do is draw every card in your deck. That way you had a crap ton of cards in your graveyard because you would discard them all. You'd draw a whole bunch of cards in your deck while discarding. And then set this card. And then pass. When your opponent draws their card for the turn, you activate this. It would switch your deck with your graveyard. And since you'd have no cards in your deck, you would just get all your cards in your graveyard back. And then your opponent, in the perfect sense, would have 0 cards in their graveyard and all the cards in the deck. So they would have no cards in their deck anymore. And then they would go, and then you pass your turn and they lose because they can't draw any cards. Now, your opponent has to have 15 cards in their graveyard as well. So, it's not good anymore. It's I can't really see any use for it now. It used to be super overpowered, but with its new change, it's not good anymore. Unless you really want to screw your opponent by just switching out 15 cards in their graveyard. But making your opponent have 15 cards in their graveyard is not really the easiest thing in the world to do, but I can still probably think of something like mill deck, which will mill 15 cards from your opponent and then switch it. That way your opponent only has 15 cards in their deck that you have to mill now. I could see that working, but then you'd have to mill 15 of your own cards as well, and there aren't too many mill decks I can think of that mill your opponent and yourself at the same time. Unless there are, I just can't think of any off the top of my head. Okay, so now we got Ring of Destruction. Okay, this one also has a new effect. Basically, its old effect where you could just target one monster on the field and destroy it, and both players took damage equal to its attack. And since that effect happened at the same time, it could result in a draw. And Konami does not like cards that result in a draw, so they banned it for a long time because it was a really good card. Now its effect is during your opponent's turn, which means you can only use it during your opponent's turn, which is kind of a big deal because it used to be you would just use this card during your turn to blow up one of your monsters to finish off your opponent. Target one face-up monster your opponent controls whose attack is less than or equal to their life points, which means you can't just blow up a huge monster to finish them off anymore, unless it has the exact same attack as their life points. Destroy that face-up monster. If you do, take damage equal to its original attack, then inflict damage to your opponent. This means you can't just finish off your opponent with any more. You can't force a draw. You still probably can. No, you can't. Because it does the damage to you first, which means you'll lose. And because it says, then inflict damage to your opponent. So it's not at the same time anymore. So you can't force a draw with this card anymore, because you'll either just lose. You'll lose yourself. It's a good way if you want to lose really quick. Then inflict damage to your opponent, equal to the damage you took. You can only activate one Ring of Destruction per turn. Wow, they even add the per turn thing at the end, which means this card can... I really can't see it coming back out of one, even with its change, because it's still pretty good. Destroy one of your opponent's monsters and inflicting the damage to them. So it's still a pretty good card, but it no longer results in a draw, and it's not as good as it was before. It's still a really good card, but not ridiculous like it used to be. And then Skill Drain and Vanity's Emptiness are now at 1, which is great, because Skill Drain and Vanity's Emptiness are the reason everyone runs MST in their deck, or the reason I run MST in my decks, or the new Galaxy Cyclone in DevPro, because if you run against a Vanity's Emptiness or a Skill Drain, it just completely shuts down some decks, and the only way you can do anything is to destroy that card with an MST. And with them both at 1 now, that's not really a big deal anymore. You're still gonna have to run MST because they're still in the game at 1, but they won't completely destroy you anymore since it tones them down a little bit. They're still a huge pain in the ass, even at 1, but kind of like how Macros Cosmos and Dimensional Fissure, when they went to 1, you stopped seeing DD decks. You still see them every now and again, but they're not anywhere near as good as it used to be. Okay, now onto the semi-limited list. You've got Quillarf Scout, already talked about that. Necros of the Bryonic. They're going to be hitting a lot of the Necros monsters coming up because that deck is ridiculous. Legendary 6 Samurai Shi-En. That's kind of a surprise at 2. I was thinking about making a 6 Samurai deck, so I'll probably just wait for the this to come out because that card's pretty good. Charge of the Light Brigade at 2. That's great, because Charge of the Light Brigade is pretty good. With the ban to all the D-rulers, Light Swords are going to be as good as they used to be. So, giving them a nice little boost with Charge of Light Brigade. If you don't know what this card does, it allows you to send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard, then add a Light Sword monster from your deck to your hand. So, it allows you to mill, and then go hand neutral. So, it's a pretty nice card. And then Sacred Sword of the 7 Stars. With all of the Dragon Rulers banned, there's really no need for this to be on the list at all anymore, but putting it at 2 is a good start for them to take it off. And then cards that used to be on the list but are no longer. Brotherhood of the Firefist Spirit. Expect to see 3 Access Firefist decks now. All of the baby Dragon Rulers, because with the daddy Dragon Rulers all banned, they no longer have a purpose and they're just kind of crappy dragon cards. Gladiator Beast Bestiar. This was a surprise because it's been limited for so long, and then all of a sudden it's just unlimited. So now you can run 3 of them, which means Gladiator Beast have a nice, this is a huge boost to Gladiator Beast because their entire deck revolves around this card because it's so good. Well, mainly its fusion monster is super good. So, I wouldn't say expect a whole bunch of Gladiator Beast decks now, but they are going to be a lot better than they were before. Gorse at 3, that's expected, because at 2 it wasn't really doing anything. I kind of want to make a deck all around Gorse now. Lone Fire Blossom at 3, I think it was at 2 before. He wasn't really doing anything at 2, so I love Lone Fire Blossom, so having him at 3 is going to be totally awesome. And Goyo Guardian at 3, wasn't doing anything at 2 or 1, so why not? And Heractic Seal of Conviction, I'm pretty sure that's the search card. Yeah, it's just the one that searches out the Heractic monsters, so Heractics aren't going to do anything with Dragon Rulers banned. Alright, then that's the list.